I will never forget 9/11. I can't.
Shall I tell you what happened the day of?
I don't know where to start.
I was in 3rd grade in a school in Maryland.
I don't remember where I was, but I remember it was just everybody was crying.
I was just going to community college.
I was in 2nd grade.
I was at work, and we was kind of glancing at the television.
I remember being in my photography class.
I got up a little late, and I was exercising one of those in-house trampolines.
I think I was checking the mail or something. I went downstairs.
That day I was in my office. At that time I was on the 26th floor at one of the buildings at Gateway Plaza.
I woke up on 9/11 in a hotel in Washington, D.C.
So I was in high school when this all happened. When 9/11, when the planes.
I got on the train.
I went to Hunter College in Manhattan.
I was out for an exercise walk, and I looked at my watch. It was 8:48.
And the train stopped in between the 42nd Street station and the 34th Street station.
I was on the left side of the bus, and I looked out the window, and I saw an airplane, which I thought nothing of.
And I was literally a block away across the street from the towers when I heard the first plane.
All of a sudden we heard a big, like an explosion.
We hear something on the squawk box. This train is stopping at 34th Street. A plane flew into the World Trade Center.
We stayed at the Ritz-Carlton at Pentagon City, and as I was getting ready and packing up, because my return flight was that afternoon after some business meetings, I flipped the TV on and immediately saw that the first tower in New York had been hit by an airplane.
They called all the teachers out of the room, and our teacher came back and she was just sobbing. I didn't even realize what I was seeing. I didn't believe it. It didn't look real.
Did the Pledge of Allegiance, and about an hour later they told us that our parents were coming to pick us up.
We looked out the window, and I could see some flames or whatever, something coming. So we thought something had happened at the World Trade Center.
I heard a voice calling me from down the street saying, run the other direction.
And I hear one policeman, saying to another, "Oh yeah, it's real bad."
I just turned around and ran, but I heard this popping sound. Not an explosion, but a popping sound, which later I assume was the glass on the tower.
I just couldn't believe it, so what I did was I went upstairs to the roof of our building. I was watching, one of the Twin Towers burning.
I had the television on, and I heard, before I even saw on the TV, I heard that sound again.
We saw the second plane come zooming right by our window, and went into the center.
People were taking out their phones, and someone started crying on the bus, and it just was very chaotic. I didn't know what was happening.
Sitting in our classrooms, we would hear fighter jets flying over our high school over and over and over.
I saw people jumping out of the window. First I thought it was trash or something. I remember seeing a man with his tie up in the air, flying through the air.
Literally, I was sitting on my sofa and I hit the ground. Just a reflex action.
My wife called me on my phone saying, "They're turning our bus around. I'll be home soon."
A few minutes later, all of these white papers started flying through the sky, just like raining down on either side of the bus.
Very shortly after that, we lost all power.
The plan was to drive into the office with my coworkers, one of whom had a rental car. They were traveling out of Baltimore Airport. I was flying out of Reagan. It didn't work out that way.
I had a pager and a cell phone, which was not uncommon at that time. And I got a beep, and I called to find out what the message was.
A lot of babies and nannies and mothers, people home from work that were screaming and crying. We all thought it was the end.
The message was kind of hysterical. Are you okay? Do you know what's going on? The World Trade Center's been hit.
I placed a call to my parents overseas in Prague, telling them briefly that I'm okay.
Ran back upstairs, found a transistor radio in my son's room. We were able to get the news on it that the tower had fallen And of course, then we knew that the second tower would fall.
All of a sudden, you hear this tremendous thunder, and then you see all the windows are black, and you see nothing. It became like pitch black, like nightfall. And that was everything falling from the World Trade Center.
My brother, who had been gone home with a classmate, you know, he wasn't able to get in touch with my mother or my stepfather, but I got a voicemail from him that I then kept for months and listened to because it just was shocking and horrible. But it kind of helped me remember, and I think that I needed that at the time to remember how raw I was and how that it wasn't a dream, I guess. And he had left this message saying, you know, where are you? I need you.
We drove right by the Pentagon. And just a few minutes after we passed the Pentagon, we heard on the radio that it too had been hit by a plane.
When I heard the Pentagon had been hit, I was concerned about the Capitol Hill and, of course, the White House.
My mom actually worked near the Pentagon, and she said she could actually hear the plane. You know, she heard the boom. She didn't really know what it was, but she heard something, and that's when they told her to get out.
I think people thought that it was a hoax. The Pentagon got hit. Even the anchors on TV, I remember, it took them a long time to actually call this a terrorist attack.
We would only get a couple miles to where we were stopped on the interstate. Again, right next to the Pentagon. You couldn't see a plane, but you could see the smoke and the destruction. You can see that something had bombed the Pentagon.
We have an uncle that works at the Pentagon, and he was running late that day.
I can't remember how long we stood there. We got out of the car and just stood on the shoulder of the interstate and stared. It was unbelievable.
When I finally made it to work a few days later, I was talking to people that worked that shift. They said that it was just surreal. You had people sitting in an outdoor cafe, eating meals, having early dinners, and there were people bloodied walking from downtown Manhattan on the streets. There's, smoke visible from there. And it was just a strange situation where something horrible has happened in that city.
That electrical smell was in the air, and especially when you went down to the subway.
Smoke for weeks. The sun was red for weeks.
It was a terrible, terrible, terrible odor.
The church bells all started playing patriotic songs. To be standing in the streets of DC with no traffic to be seen, with no noise to be heard other than God Bless America ringing out across the city was really eerie.
We finally got in touch with my mother and my stepfather hours later. They had been evacuated.
We had the dog with us, my dog Buster. I had a young woman who came over to pet the dog. She must have been about 18. She was traveling around to these different places where they brought the victims and survivors and was looking for her mom.
In the most unlikely places, you'd see signs, homemade signs with a picture of, my brother, my sister, my wife, or something. Have you seen her?
Right before we left, she walked by and told me she had heard from her mom. And if that hadn't happened, if she hadn't told me that, I would have lived with that for the rest of my life, that young girl.
I have a friend whose dad was a firefighter. Later, she tells me that what happened is she calls her mom, and he's like, first tower, we're fine. After they hear the news about the second tower, they don't hear back from him.
I think everyone lost something that day. Some people lost loved ones.
Life had a feeling before 9/11 that it didn't have after 9/11.
Being in New York, being in DC, just those, that year after even, it just kind of felt, it was a very somber mood, but it was also one of togetherness.
People were helping each other out, like in a wonderful, wonderful way.
This event that was meant to destroy America made us stronger.
Americans came together after 9/11 with a sense of unity that I don't think had been seen in my lifetime.
It's hard to express what I really want to say because it's more than words. It's more inside.
I hope people will always remember 9/11, and I hope it doesn't take another attack to remind us of that.
I really think remembering 9/11 shouldn't be about remembering the terror and the horror, and I think it should be about remembering America coming together as a nation.
The thing to be learned, again, is to be more loving.
My life has definitely changed its course. I don't think I'd be the person who I am today.
This year is our 15th wedding anniversary. We just celebrated.
It's been 15 years since 9/11. I have a 10-year-old son.
We have kids now.
I have 2 beautiful kids.
My world has changed much for the better since then.
I hope that one day that my kids won't forget how I felt that day.
9/11 is something I'll never forget.
I'll never forget, and I wouldn't want to.
It was real. We can't make it up.
I will never forget 9/11. We all lost something on that September day, whether it was a loved one or a little bit of our innocence. We all have our memory of where we were when the planes hit, how we found out about it, or what we thought would have happened. We can only hope that the tragedy of 9/11 will remain one of the most worst memories Americans have, that it won't be overshadowed by other senseless acts of hatred.